In this video, I'm going to share with you everything that's inside of my camera bag and what gear I use as a brand photographer. Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Shawon. I'm a brand photographer and coach. My mission here on the channel is to help women business owners build a brand and business they love. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you all of the gear that I use as a brand photographer. If you haven't already, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and let's dive in. For starters, I'm a Nikon girl. It just kind of happened. My first camera that I got was a Nikon, and I have been a user of the brand ever since. I absolutely love Nikon. I will say that I do have some Sony gear for all of my Sony photographers out there. I do have a couple of Sony cameras that I use specifically for video. But let me share with you, we're going to start with my camera body. As I was just mentioning, Nikon. I currently use the Nikon D750 for brand photography here in the studio. I have two bodies. As a wedding photographer, I always had backup gear upon backup gear upon backup gear. So still in the studio, I do have a backup camera just in case something happens for whatever reason. But I do have two Nikon D750 camera bodies. Those are the main bodies that I use for all of my photography here. In terms of lenses, let's move on to lenses that help me to see and create. First up, I have the Nikon 50mm 1.8G. I've had this lens forever. I'll say if you're new to photography, if you're just starting out, your lenses will last and be with you forever as long as you use the same camera system. You can definitely hold on to them for a while. They are a great investment. And I've had this lens for I don't know how long. I specifically use this lens if I need to back up and get a wider shot here in the studio. I do have some space to back up, but in those cases where I need a little more room, I need a shorter focal length, I will grab the 50mm to do that. It's also a really fast lens. I enjoy it for that as well. Now moving on to my next lens. This is my favorite hands down lens for portraits, especially indoors. This is the Nikon 85mm 1.4D. This is an older lens, but I love it. I fell, oh my goodness, and broke this hood many years ago, but I replaced it. This lens is super sturdy. I love the compression of this lens. Gosh, I can't say enough about this, but this is my favorite. This is what I photograph. I would say 99.9% of any of my work here at the studio for brand photos. I definitely have this lens attached to my camera body. My next favorite lens, although I don't use it a lot inside the studio, but man, this 70-200, I've had this lens for at least, oh my gosh, probably about 9 years. This is one of my very first purchases. I would say all of these lenses, yeah, all of them I've had since the very beginning of my photography career. So as you can see, making an investment in the glass that you're using on your camera body is definitely an investment that's worthwhile. You definitely get a high return on it. But I use this, especially if I'm outside. This is always my go-to. I love my 70-200. I love the compression of this lens. Yeah, I love it. Love this lens. Now moving on to the light setup that I use here in the studio. Most people, when they walk in, they see these big, beautiful windows, and they are amazing. I love being here. This is my creative space. I love it so much. But honestly, once you shut the lights off, there's not as much available light as you think there would be. And for me, I'd rather not photograph at such a high ISO. I also want to make sure that I have consistency within my images. So no matter if it's a rainy day, if it's cloudy, if it's snowing outside, I can set up my studio lights and still have a consistent quality of light and not be affected by only the available light that's here. I also shut off the lights that are overhead so that I don't have any weird color situation going on. So lights go off, and then I set up my studio lights, which I am getting to. And what I use for my studio light setup, I use the Profoto B2 250 Air TTL location kit for Nikon. And I purchased this kit when Profoto initially released it. I think it may have been about $2,400. I'm sure you could find this used, if not new, at maybe a significantly lower price. But I love Profoto's lighting gear, specifically because of the quality of light, the consistency of the light. And yeah, I love it. In my kit, I have 2 of these heads. So if ever I need to do a 2 light setup, which I haven't done that in years, but if I ever need to do a 2 light setup, or if one light goes out, once again, I have that backup as well. With the location kit, you also have the battery pack, which is great too, because I don't have to use the electricity here in the studio. I easily charge my battery and connect my light head, the cord, into this power pack and hang it on my C-stand, and I'm all set and ready to go. The charging is really fast too. I do have a backup battery because I would say, depending on how much I'm shooting, I can go through. Sometimes it depends on how long the shoot is too. But saying all that to say that they do charge fairly quickly. So you could always have that extra battery charging, change it out, ready to go. And continuing with the light setup, I do also have the Profoto A1. This was also one of the first releases from Profoto. And this light, I consider it as a backup light. I've also used it on location. I've had a brand shoot on location at a client's home, and I took this as a backup just in case I wasn't able to set up a C-stand and extend the light up as high because of the ceiling height. And actually, I'm glad that I did bring this as a backup because I did need it. When I do use this, I will attach a Rogue flash bender on the top of this. I'm gonna try to grab that. I haven't used that in a bit, but I'll grab that and maybe put that in one of the clips too, so that you can see that as well. But I'll simply attach it to this light. It sits on a light stand by itself. One thing that I learned from one of my photography mentors, Cliff Mountner, was always get this light off the camera, like get it off camera lighting. So whenever I use it, I do tend to set it up on a light stand. And with that, I trigger both the B2 as well as the A1 can be triggered with the TTL remote. This is an air remote. It will trigger my B2s, A1s. When I was a wedding photographer, sometimes I would set up an off-camera light setup and use the A1 and the B2. Could do that, or I would typically use those two because the cord on this B2 is not as long. I think you can purchase a longer cord, but I just never did that, just for hazards, all of that good stuff. But as a brand photographer, I use the B2s in the studio. The A1 is a backup. I can also use the A1 really well on my camera too. It produces a nice quality of light. As you can see, I have white ceilings, white walls. So if I need to use it for whatever reason, I always say photography is about problem solving. So while I'm sharing all of this gear with you, this gear helps me to essentially solve a problem. What do I need in order to make the photograph that I see in my mind or that we envision for the client, right? So all of this gear is to help me do just that. When I taught photography classes to middle and high school students, I would talk to them or share with them MacGyver. I'm not sure if you guys remember that TV show, MacGyver, but MacGyver would always find himself in these situations where he'd need to construct something, you know, whether it was him being locked in a room or I don't know, defusing a bomb, but he always had to be quick on his feet and problem solve to figure out how to get himself out of this situation. So I would always tell that story about MacGyver and say essentially that as photographers, we are kind of like MacGyver. We are in the studio, it's more of a controlled environment. So I don't do a lot of MacGyvering here, but there are times when I do rely on, okay, this isn't working, let's try this, or let's go to this. So think about your gear in that capacity of it helping you to solve problems. So what do you need your gear for? So whether that's the camera body that you're deciding on, or if it's the lens choice that you're making, think about why you're using it. And I'm gonna back up really quickly to the lenses that I choose and why I choose them. I really tend to lean towards either the 85 or the 70-200 if I'm making a portrait of someone, just because I want to be cautious and be aware of distortion. So I don't want to distort the head, or if the hands happen to be closer to the camera, I don't want them to appear larger because of my lens selection. So just think about that as you are making purchases or making decisions of what type of gear it is that you need for the work that you're doing and the results that you want. All right, we have covered camera body, lenses, lighting setup. Let's go to a few of the accessories that I have here. I definitely have all the backup batteries here. The A1, the B2 battery is here, Nikon battery is here. And one of my favorites that I use, I have the Holdfast Moneymaker in camel. I started using this as a wedding photographer to really take some of the weight off of my body from carrying 2 cameras on a wedding day. But I still use this in the studio. It's super handy to have my camera attached to one end of it. I shoot with it all of the time. It definitely helps too, so that I can be hands-free when I'm posing a client. The camera body can kind of just hang to my side as I'm guiding my clients or interacting with them or dancing for a bit. So I love that I can use this in that way. It does help with some of the weight to, you know, like around your neck if you have just a regular strap on your camera. So I absolutely recommend either a Holdfast or some type of system where you can be hands-free, take that weight off of your shoulders and all of that good stuff. Another component of my lighting setup is my Apollo 53-inch white deep umbrella. That's by Westcott. I have that light set up on a C-stand, or light modifier set up on a C-stand, along with a scrim to further just soften and diffuse the light so I get a nice, even, soft light. And once again, going back to consistency in my brand photos, no matter what is going on with the weather outside, I know that I can rely on the Profoto B2s and with the light modifiers to produce that nice, beautiful quality of light that I love. My last accessory here just are my memory cards. I use Sandisk Extreme Pro cards. I have tons of 32 gigs as well as 64 gigs as well. If you want a behind the scenes look at all of this gear in action, be sure to click on the video on your screen, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.